Good morning, everyone. A very early morning and afternoon to our panelists. I will be your host for today, and it is with privilege that I warmly welcome you to IIMC Colombo's second event, the panel discussion on the Singapore Convention, Divided Opinions. IIMC Colombo 2022 is organized by the Moot Court Bench and made possible by our IIMC partners. I extend my gratitude to our supporting organizations, the Ministry of Justice Sri Lanka, Auntie Charles Regional Center for the Asia and Pacific, the International Mediation Institute, together with the Young Mediators Initiative. I would like to thank our silver sponsor, Changarat Chambers LLC, and our bronze sponsor, ODR Asia at Changarat International Consultancy. Our education partner, Mediator Academy, skills development partner, Sage Mediation, institutional partner, the Consensus Group, our official research partner, Justmundi, and our career partner, the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. Today's panel will be moderated by my good friend Saliha, a second-year LLB undergraduate from the University of London, who commenced her journey in mediation in March 2021 at the National Rounds for Mediation hosted by our very own Moot Court Bench. She was part of the team that secured the distinction in mediation advocacy. From there, she participated in the APIC Law School International Negotiation Competition held in 2021, and she was part of a team that secured a silver medal for mediation advocacy and a bronze medal for mediation at IMSG 2021. Currently, Saliha works at the Moot Court Bench as a program director for the mediation wing. For today, we will have a 10-minute Q&A session at the end of today's discussion, and I encourage you to share any questions that you may have for our panelists in the chat box with me, and I will then direct them to Saliha. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Saliha.
Thank you, Sadia. Good day to all of you, and thank you for joining us today to discuss a timely topic, which is the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation, or commonly known as the Singapore Convention. So we're going to discuss about the background of the convention, the latest developments, and how you, as participants of the world's first investor-state mediation competition, could actually explore this world of investor-state mediation. So with that being said, let me introduce you to our panelists today, starting with Joe Tirado. Joe is based in London and is the co-head of international arbitration and ADR at the leading Spanish and Latin American firm, Garrigues. He is a solicitor advocate with over 30 years of dispute resolution experience and has handled hundreds of cases across a broad range of industry sectors as counsel, arbitrator, mediator, conciliator, and expert determiner in over 60 jurisdictions. Joe has been involved in numerous mediations, including those involving investor-state and investment disputes. Joe was one of the first CEDR accredited investor-state mediators and is a former co-chair of the IBA Mediation Committee. Thank you for joining with us today, Joe. I know it's very early in the morning for you and you're starting the day with us. We truly appreciate that.
Thank you.
And next we have our second panelist, Tat Lim. Tat is a dispute resolution practitioner with over 30 years of experience. He co-founded a boutique law practice and an international mediation practice based in Singapore. He has been appointed as counsel and mediator in many cross-border cases, including those involving investor-state dispute settlement. He also mediates for the Compliance Advisory Ombudsman of the World Bank Group and cases administered by the Office of the Ombudsman for the United Nations funds and programs, and is a designated mediator under the Investment Agreement Framework of CEPA between Hong Kong Special Administrative Region and mainland China. In 2020, WWL recognized Tat as one of 3 leading individuals in Singapore's mediation landscape. And this year, 2022, Tat has been recognized by the WWL as a global elite thought leader. Hello to you, Tat, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Saliha. Very good to be here. Thank you.
And last but not least, we have our third panelist, Lawrence Wu. Also based in Singapore, Bu is a pioneer in the development of Singapore's dispute resolution landscape. He is closely linked to the SICA, being its first CEO and registrar, and later its deputy chairman. He was the pro tem director that led to the setting up of the Singapore Mediation Center and a founding board member of the CIMC. He was also one of the initiators of the International Mediation Institute in 2006, an institute that we all know by today. Bu also sat as an arbitrator in more than 300 cases and as mediator in about 100 references. Hello to you, Lawrence, as well. Thank you for joining us today. I guess then we could start off with telling everybody what the background of the Singapore Convention is, what it is. So I'd like to start from Joe, who will maybe tell us about what the Singapore Convention is and why it was initiated.
Sure, with pleasure. First of all, let me say good morning, or given the fact it's just gone 4:30 in the morning here in London, I should probably say good night. But thank you very much for your, Salia, for your kind introduction. And thank you, of course, to the organizers of this inaugural event, global event, for the invitation to join you today and to speak on this panel with such eminent friends and colleagues. To answer your question, Salia, I think one need not look any further than the official Singapore Convention on mediation website. For those who haven't looked at it, I'm sure most of us have, it's www.singaporeconvention.org. And in its introduction, it succinctly describes the Singapore Convention as a, quote, multilateral treaty which offers a uniform and efficient framework for the enforcement and invocation of international settlement agreements resulting from mediation. It applies to international settlement agreements resulting from mediation concluded by parties to resolve a commercial dispute, close quotes. It goes on to say its aim is to, quote, facilitate international trade and commerce by enabling disputing parties to easily enforce and invoke settlement agreements across borders. So while the benefits of mediation as an additional dispute resolution option to litigation and arbitration in settling disputes has long been recognized, its adoption has been patchy both domestically and internationally. There have been attempts over the years, such as the European Mediation Directive of 2008, to encourage the greater use of mediation, specifically cross-border mediation. In 2013, when back in this, a little while ago, when I was vice chair of the IBA Mediation Committee, we began work looking at the question of the enforcement of mediation agreements. At its 47th session in July 2014, the United Nations Commission on International Trade Law, otherwise known as UNTITLed Commission, agreed that the Working Group 2, that's the one looking at dispute settlement, should consider the issue of enforcement of international settlement agreements resulting from conciliation proceedings and report to the Commission at its 48th session in 2015 on the feasibility and possible form of work in that area. So a year later, in July 2015, the Commission took note of the consideration of the topic by Working Group 2 and agreed that Working Group 2 should commence work to identify relevant issues and develop possible solutions, including the preparation of a convention, model provisions, or guidance text. So really that's the kickoff time, the genesis of all of this, albeit there had been some background work. The Commission also agreed that the mandate of Working Group 2 with respect to the topic should be broad to take into account the various approaches and concerns. No less than 85 member states and 35 non-governmental organizations participated in the deliberations, which took place over 6 sessions. So truly a global international initiative. Through the deliberations, Working Group 2 reached a compromise on various issues, upon which the Commission expressed support for Working Group 2 to finalize its work by preparing a draft convention on international settlement agreements resulting from mediation, as well as a draft amendment to the UNTITLed Model Law on International Commercial Conciliation, which was 2002. So the convention was finalized at the 51st session of the UNTITLed Commission, which came to a close in July 2018. The amended model law which was the Untitled Model Law on International Commercial Mediation and International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation, 2018, was also adopted at the same session. In December 2018, the United Nations General Assembly, by consensus, passed a resolution to adopt the United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation, recommended that the convention be known as the Singapore Convention on Mediation, and authorized the signing ceremony of the convention to be held in Singapore on the 7th of August 2019. So 46 countries, including two of the largest economies, the US and China, as well as three of the four largest economies in Asia, that's China, India, and South Korea, signed the convention on that day that it was open for signature, 7th of August 2019, as I've said. Another 24 countries attended the signing ceremony in Singapore to show their support for the convention. On the 25th of February 2020, Singapore and Fiji became the first two countries to deposit their respective instruments of ratification of the convention at the UN headquarters in New York, with the third instrument of ratification deposited by Qatar on 12 March 2020. The convention entered into force on 12 September 2020. So as of today, the convention has 55 signatories, of which 9 are parties, that is to say, they have ratified the convention. So in addition to the 3 I've already mentioned, the others are Saudi Arabia, Belarus, Ecuador, Honduras, Turkey, and Georgia. It's a little bit of a long introduction, but I hope that provides a helpful overview. Salia?
Yes, thank you, Joe. I think that was a good introduction, telling our audience what the Singapore Convention is. So I'd like to move on to Ted. Now, the convention has a lot of articles. What do you think are some of the most important articles of the convention?
Well, let me be brief with the answer for this question. I think the starting point might be that one might actually take the view that there are no unimportant clauses in the convention as a starting point. But that being said, I think if you look at the convention, I think many would agree that there's a structure to the convention, and one could potentially see a structure comprised of 5 main parts in the convention. One might see that at the outset of the convention, you look at the question of the scope of the convention, what it doesn't apply to, what it applies to. Second part of it might relate to a question of the obligations of the state. And you find that in Article 3, as well as the question of the requirements for the reliance on settlement agreements in order for the convention to apply. So that's the third part. The fourth part might deal with the question of reliefs, and that's a big part because within Article 5 that talks about and provides for the grant of relief, you do find 2 new provisions, which I think will be the subject of much discussion and certainly has troubled quite a lot of people writing about these kinds of things. But it's a subject that I think we'll unpack a bit more in this conversation. And finally, of course, the article on reservations. So I think those are the 5 areas that one might look at as a form of structure to understand the convention. But I think in terms of which of these are more important, I think all of them together form the convention. They're probably equally important. Back to you.
Thank you, Ted. Now, learning a bit about the theory of the Singapore Convention, when it comes to effectiveness, the reality of how the convention is used. Lawrence, I'd like to know from you, what are the commercial and legal realities that have hindered what the convention aspires to do?
Well, I think first of all, we must understand what's the purpose of a convention. I think the purpose of a convention, as the title itself indicates to us, is that it is to it is the equivalent of the New York Convention or the parallel of the New York Convention to ensure that while the New York Convention deals with enforcement after awards, here we are dealing with the enforcement of mediated settlement agreements. Hitherto, there have not been any instrument to that effect, and enforcement of mediated settlement agreements or the lack of enforcement of mediated settlement agreements or formal procedure, process to support mediated settlement agreements is one of the weak links, or as suggested by some parties, or at least it's the excuse for people who do not wish to use mediation. So to plug that hole, I think this important instrument came about, and it is really, in my view, great. So commercial parties sometimes are urged by lawyers to first look to the courts as a first stop to seek redress for the perceived wrongs that they have suffered, often unaware of the vagaries of the adversarial process in litigation or in arbitration. The Singapore Convention is certainly a milestone in the future development of international mediation. We know that there are many jurisdictions, they may have laws on mediation that promotes the mediation, but this is the first international instrument that actually gives a very good starting point. In fact, I would say it is the cornerstone of international mediation. So for one, it brings international focus to the utility and efficacy of the process of mediation, as opposed to the adversarial process. However, the convention is not a cure. Yeah, I think as we will soon discuss, maybe later in this process, that it is not a cure. We must not raise expectations too high. The reality on the ground is that there is still need for much education on the utility of mediation, especially at the international plane, where parties are unfamiliar with each other's background and culture, both legal and other culture, will normally start with a high level of suspicion and a low level of trust. I think this combination is actually a weak link also in international mediation. So understanding how mediation works, what mediators could do, and how mediators should conduct themselves in international mediation must need to grow. This is the space that need to be harnessed, this place that need to engender confidence. So while the Singapore Convention has a high level of sign-on, as indicated by Joe earlier, about 55 countries and 9 have ratified it. Actually, the ratification rate is still very low. So quite understandably, because states have their own legislative priorities, often dictated by political realities. So don't expect countries to sign on too fast or to ratify too fast. Mediation laws are frankly not high on anybody's political agenda or legislative agenda. So it will take time. So I urge patience. So in reality, it will take time. And but it's a great start to have so many people, so many states signing on, and at least 9 have at least ratified. So these are my cautious words in terms of getting too excited about the convention.
Thank you, Lawrence. Absolutely, there's more we can do about the convention to make mediation very effective. So coming back to you, Joe, what do you think? Is there still opportunity for reform in the field of mediation when it comes to the convention?
Well, there's always opportunity for reform, and I think at the risk of showing a perhaps controversial note, I think we have to recognize there are many, including me, I have to say, notwithstanding my background and having been involved for quite a long time in this, that have questioned the practical need for the Singapore Convention, because I think since in reality, the vast majority of settlement agreements are executed or complied with by the parties, and that's indeed one of the benefits of mediation itself. But nonetheless, I think the Singapore Convention provides, at the very least, a symbolic impulse and support for cross-border mediation. And it's clearly more than symbolic. You heard from when I was recounting the history, the involvement of so many states, so many people. People are busy people. They're not going to be wasting their time unless they thought that this is worthwhile. I think it shouldn't, I totally agree and echo the words that Lawrence was saying about the P word, patience. A lot of it is being tied, I think, with the New York Convention, and therefore expectations are very high. But we have to remember the New York Convention is over 62 years old, I think, 63 years old, and it's taken time to get to where it is. I think we just need to just pause and realize the fact that the signing of the convention by close to 30% of the UN member states in little over 2 years during a time of global pandemic is nothing short of remarkable and indicates a positive direction of travel. States recognize that signing the convention provides a strong statement of a country's commitment to trade, commerce and investment, and strengthens its position in the field of international trade. All of that is possible, very positive. And I think those of us who believe in the power of mediation will no doubt say that anything that promotes mediation has to be a good thing. And the convention has rightly received considerable publicity and has generated increased interest in mediation. And while the timing, without a doubt, is unfortunate given the tragedy of the global pandemic, more positively, one could actually reasonably say that the timing couldn't be better, given that there is a growing demand, I think, to rethink how we resolve disputes and to find a better, quicker, cheaper alternative to traditional forms of dispute resolution, such as litigation and arbitration. And as Lawrence rightly says, I mean, the convention is not a panacea. It's not designed to be a panacea. But it does address, however, a very important aspect of any dispute, which is, of course, the enforcement of whatever agreement is reached between the parties. And it goes a long way to removing concerns, whether they're real concerns or in many cases perceived concerns, and thus removes an obstacle to the greater use of mediation.
If may I just add on to what Joe has just observed, because although in these bad times, in this what you call the world crisis that we are all in, there is actually no let up in terms of the number of cases that have been referred to arbitration. In Singapore, we experienced in the SIMC, the Singapore International Mediation Center, a surge of cases that have been referred to mediation over the past 2 years. So this is although I was always very pessimistic and to say that, oh, don't get too excited about convention. But the fact that the convention came about and the sign-on rate is so high creates a certain awareness and buzz about international mediation. And I think that is what the convention has done, actually. Apart from the fact that the pandemic also forced a lot of parties to reconsider arbitration and litigation. So that is something that I think should be excited about. Reforms and changes, there will always be, and there will always need be, and it will take time. Every instrument, especially an international instrument, will need time for it to be tested, for it to be used, and reforms can come by way of different amending protocols or by local legislation. It will shape up at some time.
Absolutely, slowly but surely we will promote mediation. We will. So coming back to TAT, how exactly are countries which are signatories to the convention intend to modify and encourage the experience of mediation amongst other ADR mechanisms?
I think that really depends on which country we are focusing on, right? Because, I mean, if you look at Singapore, for example, I mean, Singapore has been a huge proponent and champion of dispute resolution. I mean, Singapore's aspirations years ago is to be a dispute resolution hub. And picking up from what Lawrence mentioned, I mean, the working group in Singapore that was convened to deal with this recommended that there be 3 different limbs. I mean, we already have litigation from an international standpoint. We have the Singapore International Commercial Court, and then of course SIAC has a very industrious long history. So mediation was deemed as the missing part, which is now filled in Singapore by SIMC. So I think other countries may want to have a look at what Singapore has done. Not everything we do would be relevant or applicable to different places, but I think what Singapore has done, latching on the importance of mediation and dispute resolution and easing the workload of courts in helping parties find a resolution that's cost-effective and time-effective, I think will be looked at by other countries with a focus on how the Singapore Convention can spearhead some of their efforts. But I tend to take a slightly more agnostic view on this. I think the jury is really still out, isn't it? Because it's very different for a state to sign and then move on to ratification. And one really has to say that while we hope that the major economic powers would eventually ratify, I think until that point comes, we're still hoping for a tipping point. Once that tipping point arrives, then I think we can sit back and say, yeah, let's look for more exciting developments from there on. But back to your question, Sadia, I think the truth of the matter is that if you look at the states who have ratified Singapore's legislation, domestic and how the relevant authority here would enforce is out there. And people who are interested can look at that and see a model that they may want to consider duplicating for their own domestic regime. Back to you.
If I may, Celia, can I just follow up on a point that Tat has made? And I can completely commend his agnostic approach. I certainly wouldn't be, I've always urged caution, and particularly about overselling, as Lawrence was referring to, and being overly evangelical about mediation, because I think you can oversell it and put people off. But one thing I think where I would take issue, and I probably would counter myself in realizing, and I think when you look at, as I say, the number of signatories is significant. And actually there's additional signatories since the original signatories. And the reason why I would just take slight issue with you, Tat, if I may, is when you consider the Convention on Transparency. There was a big to-do on the International Convention on Transparency in arbitration, the Mauritius Convention, and that just it's still there. And I haven't checked the numbers, but it just prompted me listening to you, thinking, you know, there is one convention, there a lot of noise was made about, and just hasn't got that, just seemed to almost die death before. It's not died, it's still there. And I commend people to look at it and remember it's there. But I think there's a real momentum and a desire. This is being driven by parties. And of course, I think we cannot, at the risk of stating the self-evident, the self-obvious, that, you know, there has been massive distraction because of what the world is having to deal with. So in many ways, I think it's still amazing that even anybody else has signed since the event in Singapore. The fact the event went ahead in Singapore in 2019 is in itself an accomplishment. So I think while I totally agree with you, I actually do think I'm much more on the optimistic wing of this, actually. Yeah, well, it seems that, as I say, the direction of travel is going in the right way.
Yeah, and if I may jump in as well, I think, I think you're absolutely right to highlight the fact that there are some conventions that are entered into with big bang, and then it just fizzles off, or you continue lying on the table with a few signatories and barely ratifications. Here it is a convention that actually came in a time when the world needs it the most, and it is very encouraging to see more and more signups. I mean, countries sign up for various reasons. Some may sign up because they think that, oh, the big boys are there, we sign on too, you know, but the rest may think that, hey, this is something useful for business. It's something to also create a new culture in international dealing with each other, that they need not always be adversarial. Even state-to-state dispute need not always be adversarial. There's actually another avenue, non-adversarial, that may achieve solutions that they have never imagined they could. So it's something that I think we should be excited about, but just low expectation, but hopefully real more output.
You know, Celia, let me just quickly put a quick plug on the response of my good friends out there. Since 2019, if we look at what's happened in the world, we will see that there's been geopolitical shifts, and some of the rhetoric has become very acute during the last 2 years. And when we look at who are the major economic powers that will make a real difference to how this convention would work for everyone else, you immediately look at China and the US. And if those two big boys don't come on board and ratify, it's hard to see that the convention will be of major use for the rest of the states that are signing up. Of course, there will always be a use for conventions like this, but we're talking about the tipping point, and I'm not sure whether the tipping point will be accomplished if the geopolitical landscape doesn't resolve itself amicably. But that may be a subject of yet another question that deals with mediation at a different level. Back to you, Sadia.
That was a dampener. But it's real. It's real. I think realities, these are realities.
Thank you, Tat, Joe, Lawrence, for chipping in, giving such a great answer. There was a lot to learn. So Tat, you spoke about how Singapore is adapting to the convention. Maybe I could ask Lawrence, how is Australia adapting to it?
See the frown on my face? I'm not Aussie. I really don't know much about what Australian businesses and what's the agenda there. But one thing I know about Australia is that they have actually a very well-developed domestic mediation culture. There's no doubt about that. In fact, when we started talking about mediation in Singapore, the two countries that we look at is actually Australia and the US, and how they have developed, in the culture of mediation whenever there's, but it's very domestic. Yeah, here we are not talking about something else, and I think Australia's main I wouldn't say disadvantage is that they are quite far away from the rest of the civilized world. Yeah? They are the other end of the world, and actually New Zealand probably did better, even further. So they had this need to want to be seen as an international player. So I suppose signing on to this convention does help them to place them on the map, and that they want to move forward. They want to be in the forefront of dispute resolution. That's all I can say. I really don't know much about their legislative agenda, whether or not they will really push this through. But the fact that they signed on as one of the later ones recently is encouraging. Yeah, they're not the latest, Georgia, as I mentioned, but Australia, that's good. Yeah, but that's it. But so far, there's no big bang yet, from Australia. But they have their own problems at the moment with China and with other priorities. I don't think this is something that they're going to look at for a while. Sorry for this dampener again. Yeah.
Thank you, Lawrence. So we've spoken about Singapore, we've spoken about Australia. So I'll come back to Joe. How is the EU working with the convention? Because the question lies, if the EU enters the convention, should it join as a single regional economic entity, or if each member state must join individually? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, EU is complicated, and of course, I'm talking to you from the UK, formerly part of the EU, which always breaks my heart to say that. But I think we've talked on the whole, very positive terms about the convention. This is one of the, I think, disappointing aspects, to be brutally blunt, both personally and I think generally commentators say the EU is a strong supporter of mediation. I think there's no doubt about that. I mentioned the 2008 directive. There have been initiatives as recent as 2017 to kind of revitalize that directive and push mediation forward. And for reasons I'll explain in a minute, might be part of the reason. And the EU was also closely involved in the negotiations of the treaty. But not only is it not signed the treaty, it's not ratified it. And I think that is disappointing. Of course, the EU is complicated. You've got 27 member states with different views about how one is going to do this. But the EU generally, Brexit notwithstanding, likes to do things collectively. So the consensus, certainly my personal expectation, and I think the general consensus is, when it signs, it will sign as a bloc rather than individual countries, or it won't sign as a bloc as opposed to people peeling off. But it is, as I say, nonetheless disappointing. And I say that it's interesting because I was part of the research for this. I was looking to say, well, how did the EU itself explain its position? And its chief negotiator at the time said that the EU wanted to thoroughly assess the instrument. I mean, they're obviously buying themselves some time. And that process started in February 2019, and it was flagged down then that this was going to take a while, amongst other things, because the business community would also need to be engaged. So it's kind of fudging at all of this. And of course, this is really without really taking on board the impacts of COVID and the reality that life has changed so much. But I think ultimately that lead negotiator recognized that this is going to be a political decision. Some have speculated that the reason why the EU did not want to accede yet is that it wanted to prioritize its own mediation directives that I've referred to. And I think there may be some validity in that view. And again, I don't think one can underestimate, we've mentioned COVID several times, but of course the B word for us is Brexit. And that really did kind of set the cat amongst the pigeons and distracted a lot of issues. I would just conclude with this saying it's an important omission. And I think you have to, when I say that, you have to realize the impact of the absence of the EU. Because you only need to look at the dispute resolution ecosystem, as well as the commercial power as a bloc. And according to the World Bank, we're looking at the EU had a total GDP of something like $15.6 trillion and held the second largest share of global exports and imports of goods, 15.4%. So that's higher than China and India. So that a region with such extensive volume of commercial trade may not be covered by the convention would be a significant disadvantage for the global community, and particularly impact the companies based in the EU. So it's in their EU's interest to address this. So I think they will sign in due course, and I think they will sign as a bloc. That's my prediction. But
if I may just jump in again, I really wish that the individual states of the EU, all 27 states, take into consideration, make their own decisions sooner rather than later, rather than for EU to make a single, as a single economic entity to join in, because the EU needs have to divide what their respective competence before they decide whether this should be done as a EU bloc, because you find that in this may have, as the convention requires the EU courts to or state courts as well as EUCJ to enforce the agreement. It does create a little bit more tension if you do so as a bloc. Then individual states may have to also ratify it. So I rather hope that just go on your own, decide for yourselves, and whether you want to sign on, and that may get a better momentum than to wait for EU to, and the EUCJ also will have a large say, into it. I don't know.
Well, there are many that will agree with you, Lawrence. Although, as I say, it is a very political question. I mean, the one example, if you like, the outlier is us, the UK. Interestingly, we're out. One of the Brexit dividends, if you like, enables us to do that if we want. And I think there's been frustration expressed here by more than one individual that we haven't signed up to it. There's nothing to stop us doing that. I mean, again, I don't want to just, politicians get panned for lots of reasons, but I think there is a certain legitimacy that there are lots of other things going on at the moment. But actually, it would be interesting, because I suspect if we were to take that step forward, it would encourage our European neighbours as a bloc. I still think it'd be, but to move forward with it, because they won't want to see us forging ahead and getting a potential advantage.
Joe, just to follow up on what you just said, what's stopping the UK from signing up the convention? I mean, I know there are other distractions, but it's not that difficult a decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know what? I don't have an honest answer to that. One can speculate. I do think there is just so much going on at the moment. It's just not a high priority in terms of legislative time. It may well be seem straightforward, and in other times, I agree. But I do think that is some. There is some, and anyway, we're at the risk of sounding a bit arrogant about it. I think we like to consider ourselves as quite advanced in ADR, and in some ways we don't need that. It's not a big improvement. And as I say, anything that promotes mediation has to be a good thing. But I'm not sure that this is such a burning priority for us.
Yeah, UK always have that problem, right? Like not signing on to answer Trump model law because you think. That
we like to do things differently.
It's okay. We'll let it pass. Yeah. Right. What else?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Lawrence, for giving so much of context, so much of positive energy about the convention. And I'm sure that our participants are really interested to know more about how they could develop their career and their education when it comes to the field of mediation. So the floor is open to questions, and I'm sure everybody's excited to ask questions about the convention. But before we start, I have one question now. Like I said, our participants might be very interested to know how they could develop their career. So as they enter the world's first ever investor-state mediation competition, Joe, Lawrence, and Ted, I'd like to address this question to all three of you. How do you think our participants could build this scope? What do they have to exactly do to be a part of this Singapore Convention? And we also know the Singapore Convention Week was held last year in September. So what's the scope of ISM as a developing field in mediation?
Ooh, who wants to go first?
Well, I think maybe I'll go first so I can run away and escape the more difficult questions. I think the first thing I should say is that this very initiative by the organizers of IIMC is a laudable effort. You know, your participation in this program is a great start. So those students who are who have taking part in this, I would say that you have got a gem here. There are very few opportunities really for even practicing lawyers to be involved in real life investor-state mediation. Very few. This event therefore gives you the best opportunity currently available for any aspiring lawyer or aspiring students who wants to be immersed in the and have a taste, or should I say a foretaste, albeit in a very safe cocoon, like a mood session like this, and to have an experience of what it's like in a real investor-state mediation. So this is the best good start for those of you who have signed up for this. But realistically, like arbitration, there are more commercial disputes than the investor-state disputes. So realistically, we got to also see how you're going to develop this area. Maybe you should start with commercial disputes first instead of dreaming of going into investor-state disputes straight away. Okay, slowly transit yourself. There's no shortcut in that sense. Nevertheless, there are some institutions who may be able to give you a quick start because they are leading in this area in the investor-state mediations or investor dispute resolution processes. The first one that comes to mind, of course, is ICSID. And then you can consider the PCA, you consider ICC, and even the SIMC, which is a new guy in the block, that is to say. So look out for them. If you get yourself a toehold or a step near the door, they offer the best opportunity for you. That's my suggestion.
Sounds good advice to me. I mean, I think I was going to say in a word is engagement, getting involved. And but I think Lawrence is right. You need to step back. I mean, we have to be realistic. Investor-state mediation is a nascent discipline, really. This is the year it's happening. We're always obsessed with the next hot topic. And I think, in my humble opinion, investor-state mediation will be this year's hot topic, and that's partly driven not only by the publicity and attention driven by the Singapore Convention, but ICSID itself is publishing its long-anticipated amended rules, particularly for mediation. So I think there's a real interest, and this is an area to develop. But I think it's getting involved with mediation. It's great that it's being taught at universities. It's great you have events like this, and this is unique in terms of the first one, but it's the first of at least a few others this year in the investor-state space. I think is all very positive. It's being patient, tenacious. I mean, patience is always in short supply all over, but you have to keep plugging away. But there is a career, and I definitely think there's going to be a far greater scope for investor-state mediation, but that is something that will is a slower burn than commercial. I mean, there is no one kind of magic silver bullet, but it is, so I'm sorry that I can't, if I would make a lot of money if I knew what it was. It is a question of just, getting in there, getting involved, getting yourself known, getting trained, and looking for those opportunities.
Actually, quite a lot of people here ask me that question: how do I get involved in not necessarily ISDS mediation, but also even commercial mediation? How can I be and how do I establish myself as a recognized commercial mediator? And my answer has always been, especially to younger practitioners, that you start from where you are located. You look around at your landscape. I mean, these competitions are great to sort of inspire you to have aspirational goals, to think big, and to explore for yourself what you're really good at. Maybe, it triggers an imagination, it triggers a part of you that was nascent, and then you develop it from there. But I think it's important, I mean, just thinking about this from a very practical point of view, there is a distinct difference between discovering what you love to do and what you are good at. And the two are not synonymous. Sometimes you love, I mean, I love playing golf, but I just suck at playing golf, I don't do well in golf. But I think once you get to know a little bit more about yourself through competitions like this, you start to develop that landscape. And the philosophy that all of students out there might want to develop is be the best version of yourself in everything you do. So you're challenging yourself to be a better version every time you do something. And if that is in the mediation space, start with mediation advocacy. Start with being counsel. You know, if you're handed the most junior piece of work for the lowest valued kind of dispute, do your best for the dispute, learn a couple of things from there, look at who's around you, pick up the good pieces, and then develop your practice from there. And before long, you might look back and say, I've come a long way. So I think those building blocks are important, you know, one step at a time, always looking to be a better version of yourself as a practitioner. I mean, that's the one advice I would give to everyone who's listening.
If I may, just to pick up on that, and I think there are lots of free avenues as well. I mean, I think there's the academia side of it, but actually there's a lot of like the IBA newsletter, for example. There are opportunities to publish articles on areas that you're interested in, and there's no reason in the world why somebody cannot become an expert on one particular, whether it's the Singapore Convention or or a particular clause in the Singapore Convention. But getting your name out there, that name recognition, you build credibility, is also, it takes effort and time and patience, and people want to, you know, all too often want the shortcut, not want to do the drudge part of it. But I think all of us, as I'm sure Tap and Lawrence would agree, there really aren't there are no shortcuts. You have to be focused if that's what you really want to do, and do it properly. There are those who I do know that have done shortcuts, but they're the ones that fall by the wayside because they, you know, you get found out ultimately. And if you're in it for the long haul and you're serious about it, it's a commitment, and it's a career commitment. It's but you do it in bit by bit, and you have set yourself realistic goals.
Jumping in there, and Joe, again, always nice things to say about what you say. I totally agree, Joe, that there's no shortcut. You know, there can be some doors that may be open, and if you can get in, it will help, but there's no shortcut. Even if you join ICSID or PCA or any of those, you are starting from the bottom. You are looking at things from a very basic angle, you know, level. So even so, wherever you are, like what Tat says, if you get a law firm that have never done mediation, fine, start something then. You know, be there, educate your seniors who are so used to going to court, so used to going to arbitration, introduce them to mediation. So be the starter. You know, if you get into a firm that is into dispute resolution, then you can join the team and slowly grow your turf, and it will germinate, it will grow, and then it will flower and it will bloom, you know. So take time, it takes time, but give yourself the opportunity. Don't move out of the arena, just stay on course. You should be able to reap the harvest in time to come.
Sally, I wonder if there's anything else, but while you might be thinking of what's next, Philip's asked a question, has the convention been used anywhere yet? From Philip RG, and he's saying that from what Joe, you said, assuming there wouldn't be, but it's fascinating if there's an example. Do you want to pick that up?
I'm not aware of it being used yet.
No, neither am I.
And as I say, I mean, I think just to put it in context, it's going to be more the exception than the rule.
Yeah, agree.
Right. So the answer so far, no reported cases there or known cases that have been used the convention, because firstly it's new, secondly often there's no need for it.
Yes.
So of course the argument then, why do we need a convention? You know, no, it's the banner post, it is the signpost of international mediation. You need that, just like New York Convention.
It is a signpost, and also it's in response to a lot of respondents who, you know, when they were responding to surveys done. I mean, notably the survey that led to the US delegation proposing the convention. Stacey Strong came up with a very strong reason why the convention should be considered by working groups. It will pay dividends for those of you who have not looked at that survey. It contains lots of learning points. Stacey Strong survey with the US delegation. Back to you, Celia.
Let me just say, to be fair, it's not the original long historical roots to this convention probably came from elsewhere.
Sure. Okay.
Not the US.
All right, I believe Saliha is facing some technical issues that I will take over. Regretfully, our hour is up, and that makes me a bit sad because I was pretty immersed. However, we have 60 minutes and those 60 minutes have run out. I'd just like to thank Saliha for doing such a fantastic job, and of course, deeply thank our wonderful panel, Joe, Tat, and Lawrence. As we make our way through these IIMC events, I earnestly hope that our aim of providing a rather comprehensive understanding of mediation as well as ISDS before the rounds itself is highlighted. Just yesterday, we heard from Judith Kniper from Untitled about Untitled's work, which Joe echoed in his mention of working group 2. And she herself touched upon the Singapore Convention. And later yesterday, we heard from Ixit's Frau Konieczka in the first panel. So today, our panelists provided a fantastic global analysis and I believe unique perspective, which helps us balance promoting ISDS and ISM while also recognizing the fact that this field is rather new to many participants and even a majority of professionals. So I truly appreciate the three of you for being a crucial element in this learning process and your active engagement in this event's development, which made it the success that this panel was. With that, I believe we have to bid Lawrence goodbye, and I will invite the panelists back into the breakout room and wish everyone else a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thank you for the invitation and good luck to
Thank
everybody
you.
participating in the competition.